And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Up first, today's sea ice analysis completed this Sunday afternoon. We've got an increase in the sea ice here from what we saw yesterday around St. Lawrence Island, also spreading westward here out of Norton Sound, and even more ice now around Nunivak Island and in toward Kuskokwim Bay area. Still hardly anything though from southern Kuskokwim Bay into Bristol Bay, but this whole area will continue to see ice expand west and southwestward for the next several days. And for the tonight's forecast, again, strong winds through the passes of the Brooks Range up here with the developing area of snow. It continues to expand up here over the northern interior on down toward Eagle. A front keeps it wet across southern Alaska. Rain, Kenai Peninsula eastward to another low center there over the northern panhandle, with the front trailing down. Rain for the southern southeast coast continues as well. Out to the west, the next front pushing gale force winds and rain into the western Aleutians. And for tomorrow, that front will weaken as it elongates eastward with the main low center hanging back out to the west there. Rain will spread in toward the western eastern Aleutians late in the day. Snow showers over the central and northern Bering Sea. Low pressure periods of rain here from Bristol Bay in across south central Alaska. Mostly Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula area will see the rain, periods of rain. And late in the day, rain changing to showers for Kodiak Island. It stays just drenched here for the North Gulf Coast. Into the Panhandle as another warm front, another surge of warm air comes northwestward there into the southern areas. Colder air up here keeps snow going, an Arctic boundary developing right through this area. So periods of snow from Norton Sound in across the northern interior and the Brooks Range area, but dry for the Arctic coast. And the day on Tuesday, quite an area of snow now along this Arctic front from the Arctic coast southwestward down into the Yukon Delta across Norton Sound, out into the northern Bering Sea here, including the Pribilof Islands, Nunivak Island, down into the Kuskokwim Delta. Mixed rain and snow, still some warmer air down here to the south over the southeastern Bering Sea with showers for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, low pressure, and the front keeps it wet for the Kodiak Island area up into Kenai Peninsula. Periods of rain, possibly heavy at times early, but this rain probably not as heavy as it was today, and but still some areas could see up to maybe half an inch, and it not as far north inland as it has been, although it hasn't been that far inland lately. And periods of rain continue for the Yakutat area and the southeast coast. Coastal water forecast, small craft advisories. South to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots. Sea's still up there around 25 feet, just about all along the coast here, with southeast winds at 30 knots for the central and north coast, with higher gusts in some areas. Lynn Canal, southeast 30 knots, higher gusts, southeast 25 for both Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. And the outlook for Tuesday, 30-knot winds from the southeast continue there for Clarence Strait with 10-foot seas. Southeast 25 for Stevens Passage, a little bit lighter for Lynn Canal south at 20 knots. Good gales here along the coast. Out of the south, 35 to 40 knots. North coast, not too much different. East to south winds at 30 to 35 knots. Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast tomorrow. Southeast winds 25 knots. East at 20 for the Barren Islands. Northeast 30 knots, Kamishak Bay. And for Cook Inlet, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots. For the day Tuesday, Cook Inlet, northeast winds 20 to 30 knots, strongest south of the Forelands, with gale warnings for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. East at 35 knots there in the North Gulf Coast, gale warnings, east winds 30 to 40 knots. Prince William Sound, small craft advisories, east winds 30 knots, seas 7 feet. Kodiak Island, north to north or southwest winds here on the east side of the island, north at 20 knots, Shelikof Strait. West at 15 to 20 for the Alaska Peninsula, and northwest 15 for Bristol Bay. And for the bay on Tuesday, east at 20, east to northeast 20 to 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island, east to southeast winds 30 knots. And for the Unalaska Island area tomorrow, west winds at 20 knots around the Kulsku, that front pushing in late in the day, gale warnings. South at 30 knots, and then east winds 35 to 40 knots for the Adak-Yatka area. and even stronger winds here for the western Aleutians out of the east and northeast at 45 to 50 knots. And then for the day on Tuesday, we've got north winds out here for the western Aleutians, 30 to 35 knots, and northeast winds, 25 knots for Adak and Atka, and for the eastern Aleutians, north to northeast winds of 15 to 20 knots. For the southwest coast, tomorrow, north winds 20 to 25 knots, northeast at 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island. Gale warnings for Norton Sound, northeast winds 35 knots, northeast at 30 knots, St. Matthew Island. Pribilofs, only 15 knots out of the northeast. Those pick up on Tuesday, 30 knots for St. Paul and St. George. And St. Matthew Island, even stronger winds there. North at 40 knots, seas 20 feet. North winds 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island, right on down the southwest coast. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east-northeasterlies at 20 knots, down to about 15 knots out of the northeast of the central coast. Brisk wind advisories, western Arctic coast, northeast at 25 knots, and gale warnings for the Chukchi Sea for northerlies at 35 knots. And for Tuesday at Chukchi Sea, seeing the strongest winds out of the north at 30 to 40 knots, northeast at 15 for the western central Arctic coast, east side up here, east and northeast at about 15 to 20 knots.